Welcome to Hot Iron Blacksmith. I'm Bud Harvey. I have been teaching blacksmithing for about 15 years, and I started my studies under Yuri Hofi in 1997. So today we're going to take a look at one of my introductory beginning blacksmithing class projects. It's called the heart hook. So I'll introduce you to that in a second and show you the storyboard on how that progresses. This is the heart hook storyboard that I use for introducing this process to my students. We're starting with a piece of 6-inch long, 5/8 wide, 1/4 inch flat stock made mild steel. As preparation for my students' work, I pre-cut about 2 inches with a bandsaw down to this length. That way the students do not have to learn the process of hot splitting the stock. For more advanced students, they are welcome to do the hot splitting rather than the saw cut process. The next step then is to fuller in 2 locations. Right below the saw cut with the first one, and approximately 3/4 of an inch below that for the second fuller mark. This is done with a guillotine style fuller. The next step after that is to use a hot punch to punch the hole for the screw. After those operations are completed, then the saw cut is opened up, and we progress then to draw out into 2 rectangle arms here, the beginning of the shape for the heart hook. So this is drawn out to approximately the width of the anvil. In my case, it's about a 4.5 inch anvil, and I draw those 2 pieces out. They can be lesser length if necessary, and still make it just a smaller heart. The next step then is to shape the ends of those into the balanced shape of a heart and pull them together at the center line point here. After that, the step is to progress to the lower end of the stock and begin to draw that out into a long, narrow rectangle taper. When that's drawn out to the appropriate length, a small rat tail curl can be put on the end. The rat tail curl then progresses over here. The hook here then finishes the shape of the heart hook with the rat tail curl facing outwards. So that is the technique, step by step, and let me then demonstrate how I can go through that process. For the majority of the work that I do in my shop, I use a coal-fired forge. This is a homemade hood that I started with many years ago, and it seems to work satisfactory for me. I do have some side curtains that allows me to open and close the amount of air draft that goes up the chimney to control the draft for the fire and control the shape of my forge. I'm using a motor-driven blower. I do have down here at my control a gate valve that allows me to adjust the volume of air. I also have a rheostat that can control the speed of the motor. So I have infinite control over the amount of air flow into the forge, and I can control the temperature of my coal fire to any degree necessary for the project I'm working on. Today for my heart hook project, I'm using a pair of tongs that I've made special for holding this pieces. The tongs are box jaw style, bow jaw style tongs, lightweight. We're not working with very heavy material, so it doesn't require a heavy duty pair of tongs. But the box jaw does allow me to hold the material securely while I'm hammering and shaping the piece. My first step after heating my material then is to enter it into the guillotine forge. I slide it through the forge until I can see the saw cut, and then I hammer down approximately 3 blows. It gives me indentation or fullering marks, and on both sides the fuller has rounded dies, top and bottom, so it makes uniform marks on both top and bottom. This temperature is too low for me to do the second hit, so I'll go back into my fire and reheat the piece. While I'm reheating the piece, you can take a look at the guillotine. This is a homemade piece, kind of crude looking, but it's made out of a piece of 4-inch truck spring stock, 1/2 inch thick. The edges have been ground to be half round. The bottom die is removable and matches the roundness radius of the top die. So that drops down into the grooves and makes a very simple tool to use. It has a tang for your hardy that fits quite nicely in your anvil. At this point I brought my metal up to appropriate temperature. It's a nice bright orange, and I'll re-enter it into the guillotine and strike it about 3 times. Take a look to make sure that I have the marks that are fairly uniform. If I don't like that, I can come back and repeat the process. I can now remove the guillotine from the hardy. It is finished. I do have a slight offset here, and as a result of not getting a uniform hit, I'm going to straighten that while I have a chance at this point, because after the next step, then I won't have the ability to actually straighten that without damaging the screw hole that is the next step to put in. I will hot punch the screw hole this time. Temperature for hot punching needs to be up in the bright yellow range to adequately get the hot punch to enter into the piece. The hot punch is made with a flat bottom, and in this case it's approximately 1/4 inch in diameter. I'll lay my material on the anvil, locate the center between the 2 fuller marks that I just installed, and try to find the appropriate center in between the 2 sides. I hit on the punch until the comes in contact with the anvil. In this case, my punch slipped on my vice grips. I will reassemble that, so I have control over that. I'm going to apply one more blow, then I will turn this piece over, take a look at the back side. I should be able to see then at this point a center bullseye that shows from the difference in temperature of the material. I'm going to locate my punch over the center of that bullseye and then back punch it, and that will drop. I'll come over to the Pritchell hole to make sure it has passed through, and then I have back punched it and removed the slug, so now there is a hole all the way through the piece. So that's accomplished that step. It does require a little bit of prior practice in doing the hot punching, so I recommend using some scrap material and practicing punching holes 3 or 4 times before you actually move on to applying the punch to your finished, to your heart hook stock. Make sure that the hole is centered in the side to side, otherwise that hole, if you're not perfectly centered in the middle, you will have a significant bulge on one side, and the other side will be relatively straight, and it will look a little bit out of alignment, and may not be the best. And it will still function, but not the best to look at. So now I'm through with that punching process, and the next step is I must open up the two legs of that. After doing my punching, I kind of closed up the legs, and so I'm using my Hardy hot cut just as a wedge to allow me to open the two sides back up, so I can access the two sides. This sometimes is more of a problem than others, and sometimes you don't have to mess with it at all, but in my case it's become kind of a headache here. So I'm going to use it then as a pry bar wedge. Let me turn it this way so maybe you can see it better, and bend them back and forth so the legs are spread apart. I need to get them spread about 90 degrees right angle. That would be easier for me to work at the next step. So the next step of the process will be then drawing out the two legs into the rectangle, tapered all the way out to a fine point, and maintain the same thickness of each leg as your original parent stock. While we're waiting for the heat to come, I will introduce you to my hammer. This is a balanced style hammer introduced into America by Uri Hofi. It's a sort of a modified Czechoslovakian / German style hammer. It's got a relatively short handle, about 12 inches long. This is a 2 1/4 pound hammer, and I find it to be adequate for the majority of the work that I do. So while talking, I seem to have overheated the metal a little bit. Hopefully it's not destroyed. I don't like it to be sparkling when I come out of the fire. That means that the temperature is too high. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to spread those legs so I can get to them on top of the anvil. And I'm going to draw out each leg to the width of the anvil. Back into the fire to reheat. As you, I know you can't see me, but I was using the inside corner of my hammer to draw out the length of the piece, and then turning back and using the flat side of the hammer to reduce the material back into the flat rectangle shape. So the inside corner allowed me to stretch it out, fuller it out faster, and then the flat surface allows me to reposition it and get it back into a nice smooth shape. Continue to do that. Temperature is not quite as hot as I normally like it. It certainly is below that sparkling temperature that I had last time, which is good. So I'm going to hammer where I have the heat and where it's in the black temperature range. I prefer not to hammer that range, especially out towards the tip. It's out towards the tip of the piece. If it's black, it's down in a kind of a brittle range, and we do not want to hammer and induce stresses in the tip of that piece at that temperature range for the likelihood of splitting and destroying our piece. As I go back into the fire, it's important to pay very close attention to the temperature of the material, especially where I have reduced it down to the fine tip. And because it is very thin, it doesn't take much heat in order to bring it up to temperature. And so I have to watch that carefully and avoid burning and overheating that material. Approximately 1/8 of an inch to go in order to get my finished width. I'm going to get my material from back by where my tongs are, taking my hammer slightly in order to stretch it out, and then coming back and doing my finish, slight adjustments, and checking the length. And now to the outside edge of my anvil. I can go back in the fire and then prepare the other side. At this point, I got to keep the finished leg that I just brought out to a very thin point. I got to keep that completely out of the fire and let the short unforged leg be in the fire and get the heat in that area, and stay away from heating the long, thin piece. I'm watching my fire very carefully, locating my piece of material in the center of the fire cone where the heat is coming up, and I now have temperature bright yellow, and I want to bring that piece out and get as much work done and each heat as I can at the speed of my hammer blows, as well as turning my hammer at the slight tip to catch that inside corner, and then back and forth to draw that piece out again to reach to the far side of the anvil face, and achieve that. I use the anvil face as my measurement, so I know that both pieces will be essentially the same length. And that way, when I bend the legs to form the heart will have a balanced appearance. So now I lost my temperature. The anvil, I need to go back in, and I'm down into the black temperature range, which I do not want to destroy the metal by hammering in that range. So I'll go back in, reheat it back up. I lack only 1/4 of an inch to have my finished length, so I'll just reheat it up to a cherry red color and come back and do the finished blows. So at this point, I'm attempting to heat the material down near where the two sides form the angle, the bottom of the V, and then wanted to fold those back together and then spread them back apart to achieve the angle that I want. I can fold them by light taps on the horn, and hitting just behind where the V begins to form to get those to come back together, and trying to convince them with light taps to become a uniform angle, and then I can progress from there to form the V. So I've actually brought those back together a little bit too much, so I'm going to again use my Hardy hot cut as a persuasion tool here come back out slightly into a more gentle angle. I can even use the side of the Hardy as a shaping tool, hammer into that, and continue to check for the angle that it would be until I get something that's less than what I had in the initial forging, but not too much. So for this particular example, I'm going to leave it at that. Remove my cutoff at all times if I'm not using it for safety sakes, and then I will then shape each end of the legs and over the horn in order to accomplish the shape of the heart. Now going to just begin forging the curl by starting just slightly off the radius of the horn, and then begin hammering into the horn side in order to create the shape of the inside corner of the heart. I need to make that first curl before I do any of the rest of the heart shaping, because I can't get to the inside corner there after I start making the rest of the shape. So I'm going to get that curl started best I can and try to make it as uniform as possible between the two sides. So now I can proceed by hitting that behind the corner of the horn, and that will open up my heart so I can finish working that curl. So I can get a little more space in the center of the heart to allow me to bring that curl on in and to complete the shape of that. It takes a little finesse, and they never turn out perfect, but no two hearts are the same, I guess. So here we go. Trying to make the two sides as close as possible to each other, just for visual appearance. And light tap here and there on that horn will help. I find that trying to do any of this with scrolling tongs or other helpful tools like that sometimes is more difficult than it is to just do the manipulation right here on the horn and accomplish your final shape by using the horn itself as your bending tool. And work until you get what you think is an acceptable heart shape, and sometimes you have to quit while you're ahead. So I have a shape that is relatively uniform on that, and the center line of the joint between the two sides of the heart is in center with the screw hole. At this point I need to turn my tongs around and hold the heart over the top of the pieces I just got through shaping, and begin working on the other end. So that's why I have developed this set of box jaw tongs, so that it allows me then to reach over the finished part of the heart and grab the material there over the top of the screw hole and hold it firmly, and be able to then hammer it to draw out the length of my piece here into the long stem. So my next step then is going to be working this area here and drawing that down, and continue to draw it until I have a long stem. So this process will require some serious heavy hammer blows, and to accomplish stretching out that material, I'm going to use the outside corner of my anvil, its radius, and I'm going to use it as a fuller that I can hammer into in order to stretch the material. I expect my material to be at high forging temperature to allow me to move it as fast as possible and get as much movement out in each of the individual heats. Again, I'm a little overheated here, but I am going to begin drawing that material in over that corner, and the surface has been heated above what would be the ideal forging range and slightly burning, but the inside of the material hasn't actually been burned. You can see that I'm stretching this significantly and then using the top deck of the anvil to bring everything back into shape. So I'm using the corner to draw my length, to get my fullering out, to get my shape and dimensions, and the top surface to bring it back in. So at all times I'm maintaining my original stock thickness by hammering into the face and then come back on the corner and stretch it more. As I get thinner, I'm lightening up my hammer blows but still using the corner as my fullering, and then coming back, eliminate some of the fuller marks on the surface, the face of my anvil, bring it back down. You can also use your horn if you choose and draw it out, as well as eliminating some of those really ragged fuller marks that develop using the outside corner. I'm watching my temperature and making sure that I don't hammer in the black temperature range out towards the end of the piece where it's likely to develop stresses that could split the end of the piece. I can get away with a little bit of hammering in the black range back in the center of the piece where it's got support on all sides and it won't split, but out towards the outside end you'll have trouble. I'm coming back out of the fire with substantial heat and looking to finish my tapering process with this heat. So I'm drawing out all, hitting in all appropriate spots to maintain my uniform taper and also bring it out to a thin point. I'm going to maintain the rectangle taper in the end. Using the outside corner of my anvil where I have the radius, and my hammer then can extend beyond that corner and be able to hit down and thin that down to a point that way. If I was back, my tip was back further back in the center of towards the center of the face of the anvil, my hammer will not be able to come down and pinch that material. So I'm using the outside radius to accomplish that thin last hammer blows to thin that out. At this point I want to create a small rat tail curl in the end, and so that curl allows me to have a soft, soft end to the hook, so that as you hang your stocking cap or your coat or whatever on that hook, it doesn't catch it. You can see I've got heat all the way up, and I only need just the outside 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to hit that over the corner of the anvil slightly, move it out a 1/16 of an inch at the most on each hit, single blows, one hit at a time. And I'm looking until I get the end of this piece rounded, partly around. This time I can now tap it back into itself and get it to start into a half circle. I can then, by using my left hand as the control, my hammer blows are about the same, and I'm changing the angle of my hammer contact with the piece, like raising my left hand and hitting against the angle of supporting the back side of the curl. And my hammer drives the curl down into itself and tucks it down into the center of the piece. So it allows that curl to come together as this is shown here. And now I'm going to heat the length behind that curl, and I'm going to cool this end in the slack tub, just only the curl, no more than the curl. And then I'll come over to the horn and begin the shape of the hook. So I've heated the entire length, I've quenched off the curl. I'm going to find a appropriate size on my horn. I'm going to hit on the curl because now it's strong enough by quenching it that it can stay firm and not be damaged. Make sure that my hook continues to form around, and I'm progressively shaping that hook around the horn. And I think I have about enough. I may not like the looks of the hook, so I'll come back and face it up towards me so I can see what I'm working at, and do some final finessing to get the shape of that hook more smoothly curled and more to my liking. That's all there is to it. Just one step at a time. And if the hook does not lay on the flat of the anvil, then can use the heel of the anvil to lay it over and do some straightening and some final adjustments where the hook can actually be underneath the heel and accomplish the final adjustments. In this case, I might come in and do a little bit of tweaking on the shape of the hook. I mean of the heart. If I can get a hold of it again with my tongs and handle that process gently. Doesn't take much to bring it back into alignment. Some of the heavy hammering might have moved them around and taken care of some of the optimum shape there. But basically, all is well and good in the heart process. My only step that I always do for my own projects is I have a touch mark that has my initials on it, and I will reheat the hard hook above the screw hole, and then I will hammer in my touch mark into the piece, and I will finish that. Thank you for watching. I hope you got an idea on how to make a hard hook. This is my approach. I'm sure there's others approaches around. It's a very common decorative piece, and there's a lot of opportunities for learning different steps along the way. Thank you very much.